Chapter 1. The ring burns against my palm the moment I pull it off my finger. Not because it's hot, because it's real. 3,000 wolves are watching me in this chamber, and not one of them makes a sound. The sacred flame behind the altar cracks and hisses, throwing orange light across marble floors polished by servants who bowed to me an hour ago. Now they won't even meet my eyes. I set the moon ring down on the stone altar. Clinks once, soft, final. King Dorian Ashcombe stands 10 feet away from me in his ceremonial black, breathing hard, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Beside him, Weston Calloway smiles like he's already won something. He doesn't know what he's won yet. Neither do I. Not fully. Not in this moment. I look at Dorian one last time. He doesn't look away from Weston fast enough. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It isn't the act. It's the half-second after, when the guilty person hesitates before they fix their face. I saw that hesitation. So did every wolf in this hall. My hands are steady. That surprises me more than anyone else. I expected to shake. I expected my knees to give out the way they do in the stories the pack elders tell young Omegas. Cautionary tales about heartbreak and collapse. Instead, my spine feels like iron. I bow once to the flame, the way tradition demands, the way my mother taught me before she died. And I turn my back on the king of Ashcombe Ridge in front of his entire court. Nobody stops me. That's what breaks something loose in my chest. Not the humiliation, the silence that follows it. 3,000 wolves, and not one voice rises to say wait. Not one hand reaches for my sleeve. Not even Dorian, who 3 nights ago pressed his forehead to mine in the moon garden and swore I would belong to him before the whole pack. My boots hit the marble steps outside the chamber and the winter air slaps my face like it's been waiting all night to do it. Behind me, I hear the low murmur finally break loose, voices rising, someone gasps, and underneath all of it, a sound that stops my heart cold. A howl. Not grief, not rage, confusion. Dorian's wolf, realizing too late what his king just let walk out the door. I don't turn around. I walk past the frozen guards at the gate, men who trained beside me, men who called me healer, friend, brother in arms during the border war 8 months ago. None of them reach for their weapons. None of them reach for me either. The forest swallows me within minutes. Snow crunches under my boots. My breath fogs in front of my face. Behind me, the palace lights shrink to a small gold smear against the black hills. And I keep walking until my legs burn and the cold stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like relief. I don't cry. I keep waiting to. I keep bracing for the moment my chest caves in and I collapse into the snow the way every heartbroken Omega in every story does. It never comes. Instead, there's just this strange quiet clarity. Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and someone finally let me exhale. Somewhere behind me, far enough now that it's just an echo bouncing off the tree line, I hear Dorian's wolf again. This time it isn't confusion. It's my name. He's calling for me the way he never called for me in public, desperate and raw, and for one terrible second my whole body wants to turn around and run back into those arms that felt like home for 3 years. I don't. I press my hand flat against my coat pocket, against the small folded letter I tucked there this morning before the ceremony. My mother's handwriting faded but legible. Words I read 100 times without understanding until an hour ago when Weston Calloway laughed softly during my sacred vow and something in my memory clicked into place. The letter isn't about heartbreak. It's about a ring that was never Dorian's family's to give. My mother wrote 3 words at the bottom of that letter, underlined twice, words I assumed for years were about grief. They weren't. They were a warning. The Ashcombe throne stole something from our bloodline before I was even born. And tonight, without meaning to, I just handed it back. I don't know yet what that means. I don't know that by tomorrow morning, half the Ashcombe Council will be demanding answers about a birthright nobody in that palace was supposed to remember. I don't know that the ring glowing blue instead of silver on that altar behind me isn't a trick of firelight. All I know right now is that my boots are frozen. My chest aches in a way that has nothing to do with sadness, and somewhere behind me in the dark, a king who chose humiliation over honesty is finally screaming my name into a forest that no longer answers to him. I keep walking. Chapter 2. 3 years before that altar, I meet him with my hands soaked in someone else's blood. The infirmary tent reeks of smoke and iron. Wounded wolves scream on cots lined 3 deep, and I move between them the way my mother taught me. Quick hands, steady voice, no hesitation. Then the tent flap rips open and 4 guards drag in a man twice my size. Half shifted, claws tearing through his own uniform, eyes rolled back white. Nobody touches him, the lead guard shouts. He'll kill anyone who tries. I recognize the crest on his shredded coat before I recognize his face. King Dorian Ashcombe. 19 years old, already ruling a kingdom his father died defending, and right now nothing more than a wolf trapped inside a body that's forgotten how to be human. The other healers back away. I've read every text on shift trauma my mother owned before she died. I know the theory. I've just never tested it on a king mid-collapse, snarling loud enough to rattle the tent poles. Silver restraints useless against a wolf too far gone to feel pain. I kneel beside the cot anyway. Someone stop him. A guard yells behind me, panic climbing in his voice. I press 2 fingers against Dorian's wrist, right where his pulse hammers hard enough to see through skin. Breathe with me. I say quiet, steady. The way my mother used to calm frightened animals before they became patients. His claws stop an inch from my throat. The whole tent goes still. I don't move my hand. I don't look away from his eyes, gold and wild and terrified underneath all that rage, and slowly, impossibly, his breathing starts matching mine. Hold. His claws retract. His spine unlocks. The wolf recedes back into the man like tide pulling away from shore, and when Dorian Ashcombe finally blinks human eyes at me, he looks less like a king and more like a boy who just realized how close he came to losing himself completely. Who are you? He asks, voice wrecked. Someone you don't need to thank, I say, because gratitude from kings makes healers nervous, and I go back to bandaging his knuckles like nothing unusual just happened. He doesn't leave. Not that night, not the next week. He finds excuses to walk through the infirmary tent, checking on wounded soldiers who don't need checking, standing near my station longer than any king should stand near anyone. His guards notice. I notice them noticing. 2 weeks later, back at the palace, he sends for me directly. Not as a healer summoned for duty. As himself, standing alone in the moon garden at midnight, crown left somewhere inside, hands shoved in his pockets like a nervous teenager instead of the most powerful alpha in 3 territories. I can't sleep, he tells me. Every time I close my eyes, I feel that thing clawing to get back out. That thing is still you, I say. You just haven't learned to trust it yet. He looks at me like I've handed him something he's been searching for his whole life. That's when I first noticed the pull. Not romantic yet, not quite, just recognition, the kind wolves talk about in old stories. Souls that know each other before the rest of the body catches up. His scent hits me different than anyone else's ever has. Cedar and rain and something underneath that smells like loneliness he's never once admitted to. I tell myself it's nothing. Kings don't fall for healers. Kings marry alliances, territory, bloodlines with political weight behind them. I'm wrong. 3 nights later, he shows up at the infirmary with a wound that could have healed itself. A small cut along his forearm any first-year healer could patch. He sits on the cot and watches me work in silence. And when I finish, he doesn't leave. Why do you keep coming back here? I finally ask. He doesn't answer right away. Then, quiet enough that I almost miss it, he says the truest thing I've ever heard a king say out loud. Because you're the only place in this entire kingdom where I don't have to be in charge of anything. I should have understood right then what that meant. A king who only feels safe when someone else holds the weight isn't offering love. He's offering exhaustion, dressed up to look like devotion. I didn't see it. Not yet. All I saw was a boy who trusted me with the parts of himself he hid from everyone else, and I mistook that trust for something permanent. That night, walking back to my quarters, I pass a shadow near the east corridor, a young courtier named Weston Calloway, newly arrived from the Northern Territories, watching me with an expression I don't understand yet. I have no idea he's already planning exactly how he's going to use what he just watched. Chapter 3. 6 months into whatever this is between us, Dorian shows up at my door past midnight without a wound, without an excuse, without anything except himself standing in the frozen hallway looking like a man who forgot how to ask for what he wants. I don't need healing tonight, he says. Then why are you here? I ask, though I already know. He doesn't answer with words. He steps inside and I let him, and for the first time since the infirmary tent, neither of us pretends this is about anything except the two of us standing too close in a small room lit by one candle. I keep telling my counsel I'm here reviewing border reports. He admits, quiet, almost embarrassed. I don't even remember what the report said. I should laugh. Instead, something in my chest cracks open, warm and terrifying at once. Over the following months, this becomes our rhythm. Public distance during the day, king and healer, nothing more. Private closeness at night, hands finding each other in dark hallways. His forehead pressed against mine in the moon garden, while he tells me things he's never told his counsel. His guards, sometimes not even himself. I start managing things nobody asks me to manage. Border alliance letters that need a calming presence before they reach him. Council disputes that go smoother once I mention them quietly over dinner. His wolf, which still threatens to break loose under stress, settles the moment I walk into a room. I do all of this without title, without recognition, and I tell myself it doesn't matter because what we have in private is worth more than any public acknowledgement. That's the lie I choose to believe. The night everything shifts happens in the moon garden, 6 weeks before the mating ceremony gets announced. I find him standing beneath the silver bloom trees, shoulders tight, staring at nothing. You're pulling away, I tell him. He doesn't deny it. I keep thinking about my father, he finally says. He never let anyone see him need something. The moment the pack saw weakness, they saw opportunity. I'm not the pack, I say. I know that. His voice breaks slightly. But everyone else doesn't. I step closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him despite the winter air. I love you, I tell him, and the words shake coming out because I've never said them out loud to anyone. And it terrifies me, because I don't know if you want to mate, or if you just want somewhere quiet to rest between wars. Dorian goes very still. For one long moment I think I've made a mistake, that I've said too much, asked for too much, wanted too much from a king who was never built to give without calculation. Then he reaches up and cups my face with both hands, careful, like I might shatter. You think I don't want you, he says. I think you want me most when nobody else can see it. That lands somewhere deep in him. I watch it land, watch something break across his expression. Guilt and want and fear all tangled together. I don't know how to do this the way you deserve, he admits. Every time I imagine standing in front of my counsel and claiming you the way I want to, I hear my father's voice telling me love is a weakness enemies exploit. Then stop listening to a dead man's voice, I say. He laughs, short and broken, and pulls me against his chest, and for a moment it feels like enough. It feels like maybe love really can survive inside a palace built on old fear. I don't yet understand that a man who needs permission from a ghost to love you honestly will eventually let that ghost make his decisions for him in public, no matter what he swears to you in private. 3 weeks later, the council announces the mating ceremony date. 2 weeks after that, Weston Calloway arrives from the Northern Territories as an official envoy, smiling at me across the Great Hall with an expression that makes the hair on my arms rise, though I can't explain why. I have no way of knowing yet that the man smiling at me across that hall has already read letters about my mother's bloodline that were supposed to be buried 3 generations ago, and he's building a plan around exactly what he found. Chapter 4. The night before the ceremony, Dorian finds me in the moon garden one last time, and this time neither of us hesitates. Tomorrow, before the moon and every wolf in this kingdom, you'll be mine, he tells me. His voice low and certain in a way I haven't heard from him before. I believe him completely. That belief becomes the most expensive mistake of my life. He kisses me first, hesitant at the start, like he's asking a question with his mouth instead of his voice. I answer by pulling him closer, and the hesitation breaks apart into something hungrier, something that's been building for a year under careful restraint. His hands find my face again, thumbs tracing my cheekbones like he's memorizing the shape of me before tomorrow changes everything. Say it again, I whisper against his mouth. You'll be mine, he says, in front of everyone. No more hiding. I feel that promise settle into my bones like something solid I can finally stand on. His crown sits forgotten on the stone bench behind him, and for 1 perfect hour under the silver bloom trees, he isn't a king carrying the weight of 3 territories. He's just a man who chose me, holding me like I'm something rare enough to protect instead of something convenient enough to keep quiet. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about his father's ghost or the council's expectations. We talk about small things, the kind of things new mates whisper to each other in the dark. And every word out of his mouth sounds like proof that tomorrow will be different from every day that came before it. At one point his wolf nearly surfaces, claiming instinct rising hot and immediate, and he stops himself, forehead pressed to mine, breathing hard. Not yet, he says. Tomorrow, in front of everyone, the right way. I love him more in that moment of restraint than I do in any moment of passion. Feels like respect. It feels like a man finally choosing to do things correctly instead of doing them easily. I don't notice the ring on my finger pulse warm against my skin, faint and strange, easy to dismiss as nerves. I don't notice the shadow moving along the garden's edge either, not until it's too late to matter. Weston Calloway watching us from behind the tree line with an expression too calm for a stranger simply passing through. He doesn't hide when I finally spot him. He tips his head slightly, almost polite, and disappears back toward the palace like he wanted me to see him there. Who was that? I ask Dorian. Northern envoy, he says, distracted, still holding my hands. Calloway, ambitious. My council likes him more than I do. I should ask more questions. I don't. Whatever unease that shadow stirs in my chest gets swallowed by the warmth of Dorian's hands, the promise of tomorrow, the certainty in his voice that finally, I'm about to stop being his secret. Before I leave the garden that night, he presses something small into my palm, a folded piece of parchment. Don't open it until after the ceremony, he says. It's not important, just something I wanted you to have. I tuck it into my coat pocket without argument, distracted by the taste of his mouth still lingering on mine, the warmth of his hands still pressed against my face in memory. I have no idea that parchment contains details about a border treaty. He needs my calming presence to help negotiate the following week. Proof buried in his own handwriting that he already plans to use my gift the same way every king before him used Omega healers, valuable in private, invisible in public. I walk back to my quarters that night believing tomorrow changes everything. I fold my ceremonial robes carefully over the chair, lay out the healing kit I insist on carrying even during my own mating ceremony out of old habit, and fall asleep replaying his voice promising no more hiding. I don't yet know that somewhere in the palace, Weston Calloway is meeting privately with 3 council members who've spent years resenting a king too soft toward Omega healers holding unofficial influence over palace matters. I don't know they've already decided tomorrow's ceremony presents the perfect opportunity to remind the entire kingdom exactly where power belongs. Chapter 5. The sacred flame burns higher than usual the moment the ceremony begins, and I take that as a good sign. I'm wrong. 3,000 wolves fill the great hall. Moon mirrors carrying the ceremony live to every territory under Ashcombe rule. I stand at the altar in moon silk white, the way tradition demands, months of preparation behind every vow I've memorized until the words feel like breathing. Dorian arrives 11 minutes late. 11 minutes doesn't sound like much until you're standing in front of 3,000 witnesses, feeling the whispers start behind you, feeling your own pulse climb higher with every empty second. When he finally enters, Weston Calloway walks beside him. Not behind him, not among the council. Beside him, close enough that their shoulders brush, Weston's hand resting on Dorian's forearm with a familiarity that makes the entire front row go quiet. I tell myself it's nothing. Political closeness. Northern Alliance courtesy. Then Dorian reaches the altar, and instead of removing Weston's hand, instead of stepping away from that touch the way a mate about to claim his Omega should, he lets it linger 3 seconds too long. The High Elder begins the sacred vow anyway. Tradition doesn't pause for discomfort. Alpha King Dorian Ashcombe, do you accept this bond before the sacred flame, forsaking all others, honoring this Omega above all things? I do, Dorian says. His eyes flick to Weston for exactly 1 second. 1 second, and every wolf in that hall sees it. Weston smiles. Not a big smile. Something small, controlled, precise. The kind of smile that says he's been waiting months for this exact moment and it's finally arrived exactly the way he planned. The sacred flame behind the altar flickers, dims, then steadies again, and I feel something in my chest go cold and still in a way that has nothing to do with the winter air seeping through the hall's open doors. I look at Dorian. He won't meet my eyes now. He's staring at the altar, jaw tight, and I understand in that instant that he knows exactly what he just did, and he's more concerned with managing the damage than with the fact that he caused it. The High Elder continues, voice steady, oblivious or indifferent to what just happened. Omega Kalen Thorn, do you accept this bond? Every wolf in the hall waits for my answer. I think about the moon garden the night before. Tomorrow, before the moon and every wolf in this kingdom, you'll be mine. No more hiding. I think about 11 minutes late, and Weston's hand lingering, and 1 second of stolen eye contact that told me everything 3 years of private tenderness apparently couldn't fix. No, I say. The word lands in that silent hall like a blade dropped on stone. Someone gasps. Somewhere near the back, a chair scrapes against marble as a council member half rises before catching himself. Weston's smile falters for the first time since he walked in. Just slightly, just enough that I catch it. Dorian finally looks at me, panic breaking across his composed expression. Kalen, you already answered for both of us? I say, quiet enough that only the front rows catch it, steady enough that my voice doesn't shake even though my whole body wants it to. You just did it with your eyes instead of your mouth. I reach up and remove the moon ring before the ceremony demands it, before tradition allows it, breaking protocol in front of 3,000 witnesses and every moon mirror connected to every territory under Ashcombe rule. I place it on the altar. The sacred flame behind it flares blue for half a second, bright enough that gasps ripple through the entire hall, and then settles back to ordinary orange like nothing unusual happened at all. I bow once, the way tradition demands regardless of circumstance, and I turn my back on the king of Ashcombe Ridge in front of everyone who was supposed to witness my claiming instead of my leaving. Nobody stops me. Dorian doesn't move. Weston doesn't stop smiling. The High Elder doesn't speak. I walk out of that hall with my spine straight and my hands steady, and it isn't until I reach the frozen palace steps that I remember the folded parchment still tucked in my coat pocket, the one Dorian told me not to open until after the ceremony. I open it anyway, standing alone in the cold with the sound of chaos finally erupting behind me inside that hall. It isn't a border treaty. It's a letter written in my mother's handwriting, one I've never seen before, tucked inside an envelope stamped with a royal seal that predates Dorian's entire bloodline, and the first line alone stops my breath cold in the winter air. Chapter 6. The letter shakes in my hands hard enough that the words blur, and I force myself to read it twice before my brain accepts what it's telling me. My mother wasn't just a healer from a fading family. She was the last acknowledged daughter of the Thorn line, the original keepers of the Moon Covenant, the law that created the entire concept of sacred mate bonds 300 years before House Ashcombe ever claimed a throne. The ring I just set down on that altar wasn't a royal heirloom passed through Dorian's bloodline. It was seized generations back, during a war that wiped my family from every official record in the kingdom. Dorian didn't inherit that ring. His ancestors stole it. I fold the letter with hands that won't stop trembling and shove it deep into my coat pocket, and behind me the palace doors burst open, spilling noise and torchlight across the frozen steps. Guards, council members, Dorian's voice somewhere in the chaos, sharp and desperate, calling my name into the dark. I don't wait to hear what he says next. I run. The forest swallows me whole within minutes, branches tearing at my ceremonial robes, snow soaking through boots never meant for wilderness travel. Behind me, faint and getting fainter, I hear him, not just his voice. His wolf, that low broken howl I first calmed inside an infirmary tent 3 years ago, now unraveling because the one person who ever steadied him just vanished into the trees. I don't turn back. I run until my lungs burn, until the palace lights shrink to nothing behind the tree line, until the only sound left is my own ragged breathing and the crunch of snow under boots that no longer feel like they belong to a king's almost mate. Hours later, legs shaking, I stumble into a clearing lit by a single lantern hanging outside a low wooden building tucked against the mountain. A woman steps out before I even reach the door, gray hair pulled back tight, sleeves rolled up despite the cold, and she looks at my ruined ceremonial robes like she's seen exactly this kind of arrival before. "You're the one from Ashcombe Ridge," she says. Not a question, a fact she already knows. "How would you know that?" I ask, breath still ragged. Word travels faster than snow melts in these hills, she says. I'm Marlowe Finch. This is my clinic. You look like someone who finally stopped waiting to get saved. I don't correct her. I don't have the strength to. She pulls me inside, sits me by a fire that smells like pine and old herbs, and doesn't ask another question until I've stopped shaking. When she finally does ask, it isn't about the ceremony, or Dorian, or Weston Calloway's smile still burned into my memory. What's your family name? She asks. Thorn, I say. Something shifts behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or dread. Show me your wrist, she says. I don't understand why until I roll up my sleeve and she presses 2 fingers against the faint silver mark near my pulse point. A birthmark I've had my whole life. One every healer always dismissed as ordinary. Marlowe goes very still. Do you know what this is? She asks. A birthmark, I say. It's a covenant seal, she says. The old healers all carried one. Every single record of your bloodline was supposed to be erased 200 years ago. If the Ashcombe Council knew what you actually are, they wouldn't have let you walk out of that palace tonight. They would have chained you to that altar and called it protection. Cold spreads through my chest that has nothing to do with the winter outside. What am I? I ask. Marlowe doesn't answer right away. She stands, moves to a locked cabinet in the corner, and pulls out a book so old its spine cracks when she opens it, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with names I don't recognize connected by lines drawn in faded ink. You're the last living heir of the family that built the entire law your king's throne depends on, she says. And somewhere in that palace tonight, someone already knows it. My stomach drops. Weston Calloway. I say, the name tasting like poison on my tongue. Marlowe's expression hardens. The northern envoy who's been asking questions about old bloodlines for the past 6 months. Visiting archives no council member has touched in decades. Yes. Him. Outside, wind howls against the clinic walls, and somewhere far behind me, buried under miles of forest and frozen ground, I know Dorian is still searching, still calling, still unaware that the ring he watched me leave behind on that altar was never his family's right to hold in the first place. What I don't know yet, what Marlowe hasn't told me because even she doesn't fully understand it, is that Weston Calloway didn't discover my bloodline by accident. He was sent to find it, and the person who sent him isn't finished yet. If this story has you holding your breath already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me what you think Kaelin should do, because this journey is far from over. Chapter 7. 3 weeks pass before Marlowe lets me touch a patient, and even then it's only because a boy no older than 15 stumbles into the clinic mid-shift, half wolf, half human, clawing at his own chest like something inside him is trying to escape. Nobody can calm him, Marlowe says, already reaching for restraints she knows won't work. I kneel beside him anyway. Breathe with me, I say, the same 3 words that once stopped a king's wolf from tearing through his own skin. And this boy's claws freeze an inch from his own throat exactly the way Dorian's once froze an inch from mine. Marlowe watches from the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing until the boy finally sleeps. You're not just a thorn by blood, she says quietly. You're a thorn in gift. That kind of calming isn't something every healer carries. It's covenant magic. It only answers to bloodline. Word spreads through the borderlands fast after that. Rogues who spent years distrusting anyone smelling of palace perfume start showing up at the clinic door. Feral wolves nobody else could touch. Exiled betas nursing wounds the kingdom refused to treat. I stop counting days by the ceremony I walked out of and start counting them by how many wolves I help steady. A messenger arrives on the 9th day, palace crest stitched into his coat, carrying a sealed letter with Dorian's handwriting across the front. Marlowe intercepts him before he reaches me. He doesn't want to see it, she tells the messenger. I do want to see it. I don't say that out loud. The messenger returns 4 more times over the following weeks. Each time Marlowe turns him away before I have to decide anything myself, and each time some small, stubborn part of me feels relief mixed with something heavier I refuse to name. Meanwhile, rumors trickle in from traders passing through the borderlands. Weston Calloway has been promoted to chief advisor. Council votes have started shifting in his favor. And worse, whispers claim he's been telling anyone who'll listen that the Omega who fled the mating ceremony was unstable, dangerous, unfit to hold the position everyone assumed I'd earned. He's rewriting the story before you can tell your side of it, Marlowe says one evening, watching me clean instruments with more force than necessary. Let him, I say. I'm done needing that palace to believe me. But some nights, alone in the small room Marlowe gave me at the back of the clinic, I pull out my mother's journal and study the sketch she left behind. Careful lines showing a ring identical to the moon ring, except in her drawing, the setting isn't silver. It's blue stone, surrounded by symbols I don't recognize until I find them again in Marlowe's old Covenant book weeks later, matching perfectly, confirming what Marlowe already told me. The ring was never royal. It was always ours. One evening, a rogue alpha named Holt Farron arrives with a wound so deep I nearly lose him twice on the table. He survives because of something Marlowe calls Covenant instinct, a pull in my hands that knows exactly where to press, where to calm, where to heal in ways textbooks never explained. Holt wakes 3 days later and looks at me with the kind of gratitude that makes something in my chest finally settle after weeks of feeling unmoored. You're the reason half this camp is still breathing, he says. I'm just doing what I was trained to do, I answer. No, he says. You're doing what you were born to do. There's a difference. That night, sitting outside under a sky thick with stars, Marlowe joins me with 2 cups of something bitter and warm. The council sent another messenger today, she says. Not from Dorian this time. My stomach tightens. Who then? The Elder Council itself, she says. They found records. Old ones, buried deep. Records someone apparently dug up on purpose. Weston, I say. Marlowe nods slowly. Except the records didn't do what he expected them to do. They didn't prove you unstable. They proved something else entirely. She hands me a folded parchment, palace seal pressed into red wax, and my hands go cold reading the opening line, an official summons from the Elder Council, addressing me not as a runaway Omega, not as a disgraced almost mate, but by a title I've never once been called in my entire life. Rightful Keeper of the Moon Covenant. Chapter 8. I read that title 4 times before the words actually settle into my chest, and behind me Marlowe's hand lands firm on my shoulder. They finally found what he tried to bury, she says. I don't understand yet what she means until she pulls out a second letter, one that arrived with the summons, written not by council clerks but by an old palace archivist named Tobias Wren, someone I vaguely remember from childhood visits to the Royal Library with my mother. His letter explains everything. Weston Calloway didn't stumble onto my bloodline by accident. He was sent from the Northern Territories 6 months before I ever met Dorian, hired by a rival noble house that spent decades trying to prove the Ashcombe throne held power illegitimately. Weston's task was simple. Find proof the Moon Covenant law was stolen, then use that proof to destabilize Dorian's rule from the inside. What Weston didn't expect was finding me, an actual living Thorn heir, working quietly in the palace infirmary, completely unaware of what I carried in my blood. Weston recognized what that meant immediately. If he could humiliate me publicly, discredit me before I understood my own bloodline, he could control the narrative before the Elder Council ever connected the dots. That's why he orchestrated the mating night humiliation. Not out of jealousy over Dorian. Out of calculation. He needed Dorian distracted, needed the ceremony disrupted, needed me gone from the palace before I could accidentally expose what threatened his entire plan. He almost succeeded. Except Tobias Wren, quiet and easily overlooked, spent those same 6 months secretly tracking Weston's movements through the archives, noticing which old records he requested, which sealed vaults he tried accessing. When Weston pushed too hard demanding access to Covenant law scrolls last month, Tobias finally brought his suspicions to 3 Elder Council members he trusted. They didn't believe him at first. Then they found the ring. The moon ring, still sitting on that altar exactly where I left it, had been quietly studied by Covenant scholars over the following weeks, and what they discovered stopped the entire council cold. Beneath centuries of silver plating, the ring's true core burned faint blue, the exact color Covenant records describe belonging exclusively to Thorn bloodline artifacts. Dorian's throne isn't built on stolen power through malice. It's built on a lie his own ancestors told themselves so long ago they forgot it was ever a lie at all. And now the entire council knows it. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Marlowe tells me, Things have started collapsing exactly the way covenant law predicts when its rightful keeper walks away. Dorian's wolf hasn't slept properly in weeks. Border alliances I once quietly maintained through careful diplomacy have started fraying. 3 treaties already at risk of collapse. The palace itself, according to travelers passing through, feels colder, quieter, wrong in ways nobody can explain except those old enough to remember covenant law was never just political theory. It was protection. Real protection woven into the land itself, and without its rightful keeper standing beside the throne, that protection is failing. Dorian didn't lose a convenient mate that night. He lost the only thing keeping his kingdom's foundation stable. What happens now? I ask Marlo, though some part of me already suspects the answer. Now, she says, you go answer that summons, not as a wounded Omega crawling back for forgiveness, as exactly what that letter calls you. 3 days later, I stand at the edge of the borderlands with Holt Farron, Marlo, and 6 other wolves I've healed since arriving, all of them insisting on traveling with me, none of them asking permission. You don't have to do this alone, Holt says. I look back toward the mountain clinic that became more of a home in 6 weeks than the palace ever felt like in 3 years. I know, I say. That's exactly why I'm not afraid anymore. We start walking toward Ashcombe Ridge as the sun rises behind us, and somewhere in that palace, a council waits with questions Weston Calloway never expected me to be alive to answer. Chapter 9. The council hall doors swing open before I even reach them, and every head inside turns at once. I walk in wearing plain borderland clothes. No silk, no crown jewels, nothing that marks me as anything other than exactly what I am. Behind me, Holt Farron and 6 other wolves I healed with my own hands fill the entrance, silent, steady, proof standing on 2 feet instead of buried in old parchment. Weston Calloway sits near the front beside the elder council, and his composed expression cracks the moment he sees who walked through that door. This Omega abandoned his mating ceremony, Weston says quickly, rising from his seat. Unstable, unpredictable, hardly a reliable witness for anything. Sit down, Calloway, says the eldest council member, a woman named Bertha Cole who served 3 generations of Ashcombe kings. We didn't summon you to speak. I step forward and place my mother's journal on the council table, followed by Tobias Wren's letter, followed by testimonies gathered from 3 wolves in the hall who personally witnessed Weston Calloway requesting sealed covenant records under false pretenses over the past 6 months. The hall goes very quiet. 6 months ago, I say, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest, Weston Calloway arrived in this kingdom already carrying orders from a rival noble house to destabilize this throne. He found proof the Moon Covenant law originated with my bloodline, not House Ashcombe. Rather than bring that proof honestly before this council, he orchestrated my public humiliation to remove me before I understood what I carried. Lies, Weston snaps, but his voice cracks on the word. A former palace guard steps forward from behind me, someone I recognize from my infirmary days, and confirms under oath that he personally witnessed Weston meeting privately with 3 council members the night before my mating ceremony, discussing timing, discussing how to guarantee Dorian's attention would shift publicly at exactly the wrong moment. Bertha Cole's expression hardens. Bring the ring forward, she orders. 2 guards carry the moon ring in on a velvet cushion, and under torchlight, its true nature is impossible to deny anymore. Beneath cracked silver plating, blue stone glows faintly, exactly matching the covenant symbols documented in Marlowe's ancient text, exactly matching the sketch in my mother's journal. The Thorn bloodline created the Moon Covenant 300 years ago, Bertha says slowly, reading directly from records Tobias Wren provided. Every mate bond, every sacred vow performed in this kingdom since has operated under law this family established. House Ashcombe didn't inherit this ring. Their ancestors seized it during the Covenant War and buried the truth for 3 centuries. Gasps ripple through the hall. Weston tries once more. This doesn't erase the fact that this Omega fled his ceremony in front of the entire kingdom. He fled a ceremony, I say, turning to face him directly for the first time, because the man standing at that altar looked at you instead of me during a vow meant to be sacred. That failure belongs to Dorian, not to me. The doors at the back of the hall open again, and every head turns once more. Dorian stands there, no crown, no ceremonial robes, Just plain clothes and an expression I've never seen on him before. Something between exhaustion and desperate hope. "He's telling the truth," Dorian says, voice carrying across the silent hall. "About all of it. I let Weston stay close because his political support mattered to my counsel. I looked at him during the vow because guilt made me search his face instead of facing what I'd already done wrong. Kalen didn't fail that ceremony. I did." Bertha Cole studies him for a long moment before turning back to the full council. "Weston Calloway is stripped of his advisory title, effective immediately," she announces. "His actions constitute treason against covenant law and this throne both. As for the ring itself, covenant law is clear. It answers only to its rightful bloodline." She turns to me. "The question now," she says, "is what you intend to do with a bond that legally still exists, and a throne that just publicly admitted its king failed you." I look at Dorian. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, just waits, and for the first time since that altar 6 weeks ago, I watch him choose silence over performance, honesty over control. "I'll answer that," I say, "when the king learns to ask me as a man standing on equal ground, not claim me as property he still believes he's entitled to." Chapter 10. Dorian finds me 3 days later at the edge of the Borderland Clinic, standing alone in the morning cold with no crown, no guards, no royal coat marking him as anything except a man who walked here on his own 2 feet. "You came without your throne," I say. "I came without everything that used to matter more than you," he answers. I study him for a long moment, snow settling quiet around us, Marlowe's clinic humming with activity behind me. Wolves I healed now healing themselves in ways that no longer need my hands every hour of every day. "I loved you badly," Dorian says. "I let silence protect me instead of protecting you. I told myself keeping you private meant keeping you safe, when really it meant keeping myself comfortable. I let Weston stay close because his votes mattered more than your dignity, and that failure is mine to carry, not yours to forgive just because I'm finally saying it out loud. I believe every word. That belief is what makes this moment ache more than his betrayal ever did. I'm not asking you to forget what happened," he continues. "I'm asking whether there's any part of you still willing to imagine a version of us built honestly instead of quietly. The mate bond between us pulls hard, alive, undeniable. The same pull that first drew me toward a wounded king 3 years ago inside a smoke-filled infirmary tent. For one long moment I let myself imagine walking back through those palace doors beside him. Crown restored, ring returned to my finger, everything settled the way 3,000 witnesses once expected it to be. Then I think about Holt Farron surviving a wound that should have killed him. I think about the 15-year-old boy who stopped clawing at his own chest the moment I knelt beside him. I think about every rejected wolf who found shelter here because I chose to walk into a forest instead of staying silent at an altar. "No," I say. Dorian's face doesn't crumble the way I once feared it might. He simply nods, slow, accepting, the way a man does when he already suspected the answer before he asked the question. "The council granted full covenant authority over the moon ring back to you," he says. "Legally, formally, permanently. It's yours to keep, wear, or do with as you choose." I think about that ring, blue stone glowing beneath centuries of stolen silver, and I know exactly what I want to do with it. "I'm not wearing it," I say. "I'm placing it above the entrance of this clinic, where every rejected Omega and forgotten wolf who walks through that door will see it and understand their worth was never something a palace gets to decide." Dorian watches me for a long moment, something like respect settling into his expression alongside the grief. "Did you ever stop loving me?" he asks quietly. "No," I answer honestly. "I stopped abandoning myself for you. There's a difference, and it took losing everything to finally understand it." He nods once, turns, and walks back toward the tree line alone. No guards waiting to escort him, no crown waiting to reclaim him, just a king finally learning to carry his own weight instead of asking someone else to carry it quietly beside him. Weeks later, the moon ring hangs above the clinic entrance exactly where I placed it, blue stone catching morning light every single day, and wolves who once had nowhere else to go now call this place home. Marlowe still teaches me covenant law I'm only beginning to understand. Holt still checks on patients like he's found a purpose he didn't know he was missing. And somewhere across the kingdom, Weston Calloway lives in exile, stripped of every title he manipulated his way into, his name now a warning instead of a threat. I stand outside the clinic most mornings watching wolves gather, no alpha beside me, no throne behind me, and I understand something now that took a stolen bloodline, a public humiliation, and 6 weeks in the wilderness to finally learn completely. Love was never the ring on my finger or the mark on my neck. Love was the life I built the moment I finally chose myself. Epilogue. Spring comes to the borderlands slower than it comes anywhere else, but when it finally arrives, it arrives loud, snowmelt rushing down the mountain in silver ribbons past the clinic windows, and I stand outside with my sleeves rolled up for the first time in months, watching a line of wolves wait their turn at the door. 6 months since the council hall. 6 months since I told a king no and meant it all the way down to my bones. "You've got a visitor," Marlowe calls from the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. I expect another wounded rogue, another feral alpha needing a steady voice to talk him back into his own skin. Instead, I find Tobias Wren standing at the edge of the clearing, the old archivist who risked his position to expose Weston Calloway, holding a leather satchel against his chest like it's something fragile. "I didn't expect to see you all the way out here," I say. "The council sent me," he says. Officially, this time, not sneaking through sealed vaults after midnight. He hands me the satchel. Inside, I find dozens of pages, copies of records pulled from every corner of the Ashcombe archives, names and dates stretching back 300 years. An entire family tree finally reconstructed after generations of deliberate erasure. "Your mother wasn't the last of anything," Tobias says. "There are cousins, second cousins, a whole branch of the Thorn line scattered across 4 territories, living quiet lives, never knowing what they carried in their blood. The council thought you should know you're not the only one left." I sit down hard on the clinic steps, the satchel heavy in my lap, and for the first time since that altar, I let myself cry. Not from grief, from something closer to relief, the kind that comes when a wound you thought would never close finally starts knitting itself back together. Marlowe sits beside me without a word, the way she always does when words would only get in the way. "What will you do with this?" she asks eventually. "Find them," I say. "Every single one." That becomes my work over the following months, alongside healing, alongside teaching Holt and 2 other wolves the covenant techniques Marlowe spent a lifetime gathering. Letters go out across 4 territories, careful and quiet at first, then bolder as answers arrive. A healer in the Eastern Hills who always wondered why her hands worked faster than anyone else's. A young beta soldier whose commanding officer once called his calm under pressure unnatural. A grandmother in a fishing village who kept a ring passed down through her family that nobody could ever explain, silver on the outside, and when I finally travel there myself and hold it to the light, blue underneath. The Thorn bloodline isn't gone. It was just scattered, hidden, waiting for someone to go looking. Dorian sends 1 letter that winter, the first contact since the morning he walked away from the clinic alone. I almost don't open it. When I finally do, it isn't a plea, isn't an apology dressed up as a request for a reunion. It's short, plain, honest in a way I never once got from him during our 3 years together. He writes that he stepped back from daily rule, that he handed border negotiations to a council member with actual patience for diplomacy, that his wolf finally sleeps most nights now, not because the ache is gone but because he stopped expecting someone else to carry what only he can carry. He writes that Weston Calloway was last seen in a southern port town, stripped of every noble connection, a warning story parents in the Northern Territories now tell their ambitious children. He doesn't ask me to come back. He simply thanks me for the healing I gave him even when I didn't know what I was giving, and for the lesson he learned too late to keep me but early enough to become a better king because of it. I fold the letter and place it in the same drawer where I keep my mother's journal, not because I'm holding on to him, but because some chapters deserve to be remembered clearly instead of buried out of bitterness. The following spring, the clinic doubles in size. Marlowe hands me the old Covenant book officially now, not as a loan, but as something passed down the way it should have been generations ago. Holt runs the Eastern Wing. 2 of my newly discovered cousins arrive that summer, uncertain and searching, and I watch the same recognition cross their faces that once crossed mine in an infirmary tent 3 years ago, the moment someone realizes their hands were always meant for more than they were ever told. Above the entrance, the moon ring still hangs, blue stone catching every sunrise, and wolves who arrive broken now leave standing straighter, not because a king claimed them, but because somebody finally taught them their worth was never up for negotiation in the first place. I think about that mating night sometimes, the silence in that hall, the cold walk into the forest. I used to believe that night ended something. Now I understand it was only ever the beginning of the story I was always meant to build. If this journey meant something to you, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you never miss the next story on this channel. And leave a comment below sharing which moment stayed with you most, because every story like this one grows stronger when it's shared with someone who needs to hear it.